Lauren Hayes is my name. As a 31-year-old emergency room nurse, I believed I had seen every possible method someone could harm a loved one. After emergency surgery, I discovered that my mother had uploaded pictures of me unconscious and hooked up to an IV. She captioned my worst night with a candle emoji and a coupon code to her 80,000 followers before anybody had even asked how I was doing. It was referred to as grief by my family. After calling it what it was, I permanently left her life. This is the bit that no one anticipated, though. 2 years later, my mother begged me to return home while standing on my porch without a camera or makeup, declaring that she had changed. I didn't trust her, nor did I smash the door. Rather, I used a page from my nursing notebook to write a list, which I then slipped across a dining table. My family looks the way it does now because of what was on that list and what she did when she got to the last line. Welcome back to Inheritance Chronicles, where reserved individuals at last voice the opinions their families find objectionable. This tale is for you if you've ever had to defend your tranquility from someone who accuses you of desertion. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. I must transport you back to Neepville, Illinois, to a yellow home with a porch swing that was off-limits to everybody until it was shot in order to explain the list. When I was 8 years old, my mother, Patricia, who teaches preschool and has a great camera and smile, launched a blog called The Bright Side House. It started off innocently enough: craft booths, pumpkin patches, and myself. Then the number of followers began to rise, and our house subtly became a set. While she located the light, breakfast became chilly. Before learning cursive, I was able to distinguish between a genuine clothing and a shooting costume. Other children had tasks to do. I had reshoots. The way some women garden is how my mother guided our family. Always tenderly with shears. Widen your smile. Reiterate, but with more joy. Sweetheart, one more, just one more. After working as an electrician, my father, Douglas, picked up an unpaid camera when he got home. Before they were sold in shops, he made her a ring light stand. Fairness is important to me, therefore I want to be fair here. Eventually, it contained actual money that was used to pay for summer camp, braces, and the porch swing itself. My mom wasn't at a casino or hiding in a bottle. Every day, she was there, calling it love while aiming a lens at us. I trusted her as much as you trust the weather for a long time. Then, on my 13th birthday, she released a post that, for a whole year, followed me via every corridor of my middle school. Before I tell you what it was, I need to take a breath. Lauren's First Period, A Bright Side Guide to Raising Confident Girls, was the headline of the piece. A picture of me sobbing on the floor of our bathroom was taken via the doorway I hadn't considered shutting. She described my cramps in her writing. She tagged a brand of heating pad. It gave a great performance, as she loved to remark. The 8th grade also did well. For months, boys placed pads on my desk. I wanted to slip between the floor tiles and remain there when a teacher called me aside to compliment my bravery. I want you to know this because it will be important in the future. I didn't leave peacefully. I got into fights when I was 13. In my bedroom, I ripped down the curtain she had been using as a background. When I was 16, I sat on the steps with my arms folded and refused to shoot a return to school hall while the sponsored bags waited in their plastic. My mom didn't scream. She took a more successful action. She got quiet and hurt and said, "That camera paid for your braces, Lauren. It paid for this house. You take food off our table over a little embarrassment. Guilt is a leash that fits a teenager perfectly." My dad would sometimes take a frame off the wall if I begged, but he never once unplugged the camera. And the year I turned 14, my mother brought home a new baby and a new content calendar in the same week. My sister, Emma, a fresh face for the brand. I held that little pink bundle in the hospital lobby, away from the lens, and I made her a promise I had no power to keep. I promised she would never be the star. It's the only promise leaving ever made me break. At 24, I moved out for good, 45 minutes away to Chicago into an apartment the size of my mother's pantry. And I loved it the way you love oxygen. I put myself through nursing school on night shifts and loans. And I set one boundary clearly in words a preschool teacher could not misunderstand. No photos of me ever again. Not tagged, not cropped, not in the background. She agreed with the wounded grace of a woman granting a strange favor. Mostly she kept it if you don't count the throwback posts. Old footage of little me she recycled every anniversary because, as she explained, that content already existed. I let it go. You pick your battles, and I was tired. I met Mark around then, a field engineer with calm hands and no idea who the bright side house was, which might be the most attractive thing about him. He learned quickly enough. He also learned that I kept him 3 steps back from my family. And though it took me years to see it, 3 steps back from me, I had gotten so good at not being seen that I did it even with the lights off and the door locked. Privacy was my native language by then. So when I found out at 29 that I was pregnant, I told exactly one person, Mark, and I hugged that secret to my chest like a hot water bottle. 11 weeks of something that was entirely gloriously mine. No caption, no audience, just a due date in June, and a man who kept resting his hand on my stomach during commercials. Then, on a Tuesday night shift under the fluorescent lights, I worked beneath something inside me tore. I knew the pain was wrong before I could name it. The way you know a smoke alarm from an oven timer. I was 6 hours into my shift when it folded me over a supply cart. My friend Rebecca took one look at my face and got me on a gurney in the department where I worked. Ectopic pregnancy ruptured. The baby had implanted in the wrong place, and there is no version of that story where the baby is okay. And if you wait too long, there's no version where the mother is either. They ran me to surgery under lights I had stood beside 100 times. Mark was 30,000 FT over Texas with his phone off, flying to a job site, unreachable in the 1 hour of his life I needed him landed. So the hospital did what hospitals do. They went down the emergency contact list, and the second name on it was my mother. Patricia arrived within the hour, and I will tell you the truth. Some animal part of me was glad. She was let in as next of kin while I was in recovery. Still under, still gone. I woke up at 4 a.m. to a kind nurse with tired eyes telling me I had lost the pregnancy and 1 fallopian tube, and that I was going to be fine, a word we use in medicine like a bandage. I remember nodding. I remember asking for water, and I remember the way the aide by the door looked at me a little too long, a little too soft before her eyes flicked away like she'd been caught. My phone sat on the bedside tray. When I turned it over, the screen was a wall of notifications that would not stop scrolling, 200 of them, all tagging me in my mother's newest post. The photo was taken from the foot of my recovery bed. I was unconscious, gray as dishwater, an IV in my arm and a tube under my nose, my gown slipping off one shoulder. My mother had gotten the lighting right. She always did. The caption began, "Our family is walking through an unthinkable loss tonight." It went on. She named the pregnancy I had told no one about. She wrote, "Hug your babies tonight with a little dove." And then, because Griefa apparently pairs with retail, she linked a grief journal from her affiliate shop and a discount code for a candle company, Bright Side 15, if you're curious. The post was already the highest performing thing on her page in over a year. The comments were a wall of praying hands from strangers who knew my baby existed before Mark's plane touched the ground. He found out his child was gone from a phone notification in a rental car from his almost mother-in-law's shopping page before I could reach him. My coworkers had seen me like that. People I hand instruments to had seen me like that. While I lay there scrolling, the door opened and my mother came in carrying gas station flowers and glowing like a woman coming home from a good church service. "And honey," she said, "the response has been incredible. People need to see this. You're helping so many women." I asked her very quietly because quiet was all I had to take it down. She patted my leg through the blanket and told me I would understand when the numbness wore off. What she actually said next, standing in front of my IV pole with her phone still in her hand, told me everything I needed to know about who my mother had always been. She said no. Not a cruel no, which almost would have been easier. a reasonable managerial no delivered in her explaining to sponsor's voice. Sweetheart, it's already reached 90,000 people. If I delete it now, it looks like we're hiding something. There's a narrative to consider. A narrative? I was 14 hours out of emergency surgery, minus one fallopian tube in one future, and my mother was workshopping optics at the foot of my bed. When I said the words private in mine, she flinched like I'd used profanity, then went straight to wounded. So I'm not allowed to grieve my own grandchild, she said, dabbing at dry eyes. You're punishing me for loving too loud. My dad hovered in the doorway, holding her camera bag, studying the floor tile like it owed him money, and said nothing at all. And then I saw movement behind him. Emma, 15 years old, in the hallway of a hospital at 7 in the morning on a school day, holding her phone up sideways, filming through the little window. Our eyes met over the top of it, and she went pale and lowered it and mouthed. Mom said to get footage of you two making up for the vlog. She looked like she wanted to dissolve. It wasn't her fault. She was a kid following the only house rules she'd ever known. But something in my chest went very still and very cold, like a monitor flatlining into one clean tone. My mother hadn't broken the rules of our family. I finally understood that she was the rules. There was no version of me awake or under anesthesia, whole or bleeding, that she would not sell. I was discharged on a Thursday. I went back to my apartment in Chicago, and I did not make a scene because scenes were her currency, and I was done paying in it. I blocked her number, her accounts, her email. I sent one text before the wall went up. Until you understand what you took from me, don't call. Then I turned off my phone and slept for 11 hours next to a man who kept one hand on my shoulder all night. My mother responded the only way she knew how. Within a week, there was a video 9 minutes long filmed in good light. My daughter left me while I was grieving. It was called. She cried on camera the way she did everything on camera beautifully. People need to see what arrangement does to a mother. The caption said, "The internet saw." Strangers found my work profile and flooded it with 1-star reviews calling me a heartless nurse. Someone mailed a sympathy card to my apartment addressed to the daughter who abandoned her grieving mom. My Aunt Beverly called and led with, "She's your mother, Lauren. Family comes first," and could not tell me a single fact about my surgery. My father never called at all, which was its own kind of information. Here's the arithmetic nobody warns you about. She took my privacy, and when I objected, the family bill came to me. I lost my mother, my father, my sister down the hall of that yellow house, and the right to tell my own story all in 1 month. And the story wasn't even done charging me. But I had a locked door, a quiet man, and a job where I was useful. For 2 years, that was the whole story. Then on a gray Tuesday in October, my doorbell rang. Let me compress the 2 years because healing is boring to watch and expensive to live. I found a therapist named Carol who kept tissues she never pushed toward me. I worked. I got very good at trauma cases. The way you get good at anything you'd rather not understand from the inside. Mark proposed on an ordinary Sunday with the ring in his jacket like he'd been carrying it for months because he had. I said not yet. He asked if it was him. I said no. And that was true, and I could not explain 1 inch further. And that was the problem. He knew the events of that night at the hospital. He did not know the weather of it. The name I had picked out and never said aloud. The way I still counted forward to June sometimes. I'd hidden it even from him. Filed under safe. Carol had a theory that I'd stopped letting anyone see me at all, that I was running a museum after hours. Lights off. Alarms on. I told her that was very poetic and changed the subject, and I watched my mother's channel the whole time. I'm not proud of it. I made an account with no name and no photo, and I checked the bright side house like you'd check the weather in a country you fled. What I saw was my sister. Emma was 17 now, and she was the brand. Raising Emma, the series was called. Her driving test, her dress shopping, her acne routine, scheduled and sponsored and captioned in my mother's voice. Then one video kept me up until 3:00 in the morning, and it wasn't because my sister was smiling in it. It was because she wasn't, and the camera kept rolling. Anyway, the video was called Emma's First Heartbreak, How Our Family Copes. Some boy had ended things with my little sister over text, the way boys do. And within a day, my mother had filmed her swollen-eyed at the kitchen island, a mug of cocoa placed in frame like a prop, because it was a prop. Emma kept glancing off camera, asking with her eyes if she was done yet. She was not done yet. The video ran 9 minutes and outperformed everything on the channel that month. Over 1 million views of my sister's worst week. Sponsored naturally by a tea brand. I watched it twice and threw up the second time. Then I did what I could do from behind a blocked number and a burner account. I got a message to Emma through her best friend's older sister, a phone number with no name attached. She called on a Saturday, whispering from her closet, and what I heard in 20 minutes rearranged me. She loved the comments and hated the camera. She could not always tell the difference between being loved and being watched because nobody had ever shown her one without the other. She didn't know what a life off camera even looked like, the way you can't miss a country you've never visited. I said, "Come stay with me anytime, no phones." And she laughed like I'd offered her a weekend on the moon. That same week on a night shift, I read about a law our state had just passed about kids in monetized videos, money owed into trust, records parents had to keep. I read it twice and saved it quietly. The way you pocket a key to a door you hope you'll never need. If you've ever watched somebody you love get used and felt that specific helpless anger, you know why I couldn't look away. So tell me in the comments honestly. Would you have gone back for your sister or stayed gone? Subscribe because what happened next? I still have trouble believing. The internet turned around and did to my mother exactly what she had taught it to do to us. It started as these things do now with somebody else's grown child. A former blog kid, a young woman a few years behind me in the same strange industry, posted an essay about growing up as content. It went everywhere. Suddenly, there were news segments about family vloggers and a hashtag and lists. The Bright Side House made the lists. Somebody dug up the hospital post about me, screenshotted the candle code beside my unconscious face, and it traveled further in a weekend than my mother's apology tour ever would. Her biggest sponsor paused the partnership by Monday. The algorithm, which had loved her for 2 decades, dropped her like a hot pan. Snorts, she posted an apology video, 4 minutes, reading from her phone. The phrase, "I'm sorry if you were hurt doing its usual heavy lifting," and the internet, which can smell a performance faster than any daughter, laughed at her. The channel went into free fall. And here's the part I want to be honest about because this story is useless if I'm not. I did not enjoy it. I had imagined some version of this for years, and when it came it tasted like nothing. Every viral post dunking on my mother had my unconscious face in it or Emma's swollen eyes. The internet wasn't defending us. It was just changing channels. Their outrage was content, too, and my family was still the raw material. And I understood then bone deep that whatever I did about my mother, I could never do it out there. Not my arena, never was. 3 weeks after her last sponsor walked away on that gray Tuesday in October, my doorbell rang and I looked through the peephole, and my stomach dropped through the floor. My mother stood in my hallway looking like a woman I had never met wearing my mother's face. No makeup, gray showing at her part, an inch of honesty. She'd have died before showing an audience. A cardigan I recognized from before the blog, before everything peeled at the elbows. She did not have her phone in her hand. I noticed that the way you notice a soldier without his rifle. I opened the door the width of my forearm. She said my name and her chin went and she said, "I've been in therapy since July, 3 months. I'm not here to protect myself. I would understand if you closed this door because I did horrible things to you and I called them love." She had practiced it. The rehearsal was audible to me. To be fair, you would also practice. It was a long trip from Neighborville. Then she said what she had really come to say. "Thanksgiving is in 6 weeks. Come home. Not for me, for Emma, for your dad. I've changed, Lauren. I'm asking for the chance to prove it." As I stood there in my scrubs, I did what I do at work when a patient tells me their hands shake and their pain is a 2. I saw the tears in her eyes, actual ones. But with her, tears had always been genuine. The question was never that. The oldest person in my family asked the question, and I heard it quite clearly in my own mind. How do you distinguish between a lady who has changed and one who is just acting? I softly shut the door and leaned against it, trembling, after saying, "I'll think about it." I saw her sitting in her parked vehicle for 10 minutes straight via the opening in the curtains. She never answered her phone. She would have recorded the doorstep 2 years ago. I didn't know how to handle it. That Thursday, I carried it to Carol like an unreachable splinter. Do I have to give her a chance? Carol returned the inquiry, doing her annoying therapist thing. To you, what would evidence even look like? I started to respond that nothing would, but then I realized that wasn't the case, and I sat on my own sofa feeling alienated. Over plates, Mark weighed in too lightly. "Meg, you continue to defend a door and call it a life." He wasn't incorrect, and we both knew it, so I really shouted at him and then stood in the kitchen listening to the echo. Everyone had been kept out by the wall I had constructed to keep my mother out. After hours, he had suggested to a museum. Emma, a 17-year-old who was only a year away from leaving that home, was speaking to me from closets. The only door that remained open to my sister's life would be closed if I closed this door on my mother. Emma needed a witness within the walls, regardless of what my mother deserved. This is where I ended up, and I will defend the reasoning to anybody. Neither my remarks nor hers would be trusted. Her tool was words. She was able to manipulate them in any way. Particular behaviors are what I would trust. Eventually, none of them could be carried out, or the whole endeavor came to an end. I took a sheet from my nursing notebook, the type I use for handoff notes, and penned 5 lines in block letters while sitting at my kitchen table that evening. I was ready to utter the first 4 aloud at a restaurant. Since I wasn't writing it for her, I folded over the 5th one. I wrote it for myself. We first met in a cafe off Route 59 with vinyl booths, neutral ground, and coffee that seemed like torture. When she sat down, she reached across the table. I continued to hold my mug in my hands. After that, I saw my mother read the terms written in my blocky nurse's handwriting as I slid the sheet over the laminate. 1. You will never again post about Emma or myself. No pictures, no narratives, no memories, and never any ambiguous updates concerning your girlfriends. 2. You destroy everything. Everything. Every picture and video of the 2 of us on every platform, including my first period, the hospital post, and 2 decades of what you refer to as your life's work. 3. You visit a genuine, qualified therapist once a week, but you're never satisfied. No documentary on your development, no series about your therapeutic journey. 4. You made a face-to-face, private apology to Emma. You had no audience, no script, and you never told any of your followers that you did it. She went through them twice. She made a little movement with her lips similar to how she used to commit sponsor material to memory. Then she glanced up and put one finger on the folded 5th line. I answered, "That one's not yours yet. You'll hear it if the first 4 are ever finished." In a quiet voice, she inquired as to how long this would take. If it's genuine, I argued, it can occur without the cameras. Mom, that's the whole exam. The only test is that. Then there was a gradual, tectonic movement behind her face. The oddest thing she said was so faint I almost missed it. She folded the list along my crease and placed it in her handbag as you would pocket evidence against yourself. My mother never wrote lists like you do. At the time, I had no idea what it meant. Yes, I would. The first step occurred more quickly than I anticipated. Instead of what I was anticipating, it was step 2 that ruptured something in that yellow home. That following evening, the feed froze. It was almost miraculous that there was no notification or farewell post. In 20 years, my mother had never done anything without making an announcement. The archive began to shrink throughout the course of the next 3 weeks. During my breaks, I would recharge and discover that another year of our life had passed. Whole childhood seasons disappearing in chunks. One evening, as I watched her destroy her life's work one square at a time, I was actually at a loss for words as I sat in the hospital parking garage. A sense of relief. Indeed. And behind that, uninvited, was a thin anguish I hated. At the Route 59 restaurant, we began our Sunday coffees, awkward 40-minute formal appointments. She arrived early. She either didn't bring her phone or kept it tucked away. In any case, I never saw it. I realized that I had never seen my mother's hands empty in my adult life, till she sat down one Sunday with nothing at all. The hospital post, however, remained up. My gray, unconscious visage continued to earn its little flow of candle commissions as everything else went away, leaving only that one square. And when I asked her about it directly, she looked at the table and said, "The platform archive is complicated, honey. I'm working on it." A flag went up in me, small and red. In my job, complicated usually means there's something I don't want to tell you. I didn't push. I logged it the way I log a temperature that hasn't spiked yet. Then Emma texted me on a Thursday night. "Mom apologized to me last night. No script. She cried ugly. It was real, I think. And then before I could even feel relieved, the phone buzzed again. But come get me this weekend. There's something in her office you need to see." I picked Emma up Saturday morning for a weekend at my apartment. A thing we could suddenly do now, and the strangeness of that alone should have warned me life was moving too smoothly. In the car, she talked in a rush, like someone finally off airplane mode. The apology had been real. She was sure of it. Their mother had said the sentence, "I did things to you that you'll be untangling for years," which is not a sentence you can get from a script doctor. But Mom's phone had been ringing lately, and the screen always said, "Priya, her manager from the good years." "And Mom takes those calls in the car now," Emma said, looking out the window in the garage with the door down. You don't take calls in a closed garage unless the house isn't private enough. And our house had never once been private. Before we'd left, Emma had walked me upstairs past the office, ostensibly for a phone charger. The whiteboard by the desk. The old content calendar had been wiped, but wiped fast. The way you wipe something when the doorbell rings. Ghost letters survived in the corner, part of a Word episode, and below it, faint column lines with dates. I stood there telling myself whiteboards get reused, that 2 decades of habit leave 2 decades of ghosts, that a woman who deleted her own empire had earned a little benefit of the doubt. I told myself quite a lot of things that week. Then Sunday evening on my couch, wrapped in a blanket with cocoa she'd made herself for once, Emma opened her banking app to show me something. And after that, I stopped telling myself anything at all. Here is what 10 years as the face of a family brand had earned my sister according to the account with her name on it. Almost nothing. A few hundred, birthday money, babysitting, that was the whole ledger. The college fund my mother had toasted on camera. The "Your future is safe" sweetheart fund invoked in a dozen sponsored posts. Emma had never seen a statement for it, not once. When she'd asked last spring, she got the voice, the wounded one. "We're a family, not a business. Why would you talk to me like a business?" Except the money had moved like a business. It had gone into the family LLC, the one that owned the cameras and paid the mortgage on the yellow house and leased my mother's white Tahoe. Nothing about it was cartoonish theft. Nobody bought a yacht. It was worse in a quieter way. My sister's childhood had been poured into the household concrete legally, casually, the way it happened in thousands of houses like ours, which is exactly why our state finally wrote a law about it. I sat there doing the thing I do, which is getting very calm while a machine in my chest starts printing out a plan. My first instinct, I'll admit it, was to handle it myself, the way I handle everything. Quietly, alone, museum hours. I actually reached for my own phone to draft the confrontation text. Then I stopped because I am a nurse, and if there is one thing my job has beaten into me, it is that you do not operate on your own family and you do not confront a hemorrhage with a stern conversation. You call the people whose job it is. There was a law now in our state about kids like Emma. Monday morning, on 3 hours of sleep, I made 2 phone calls. The first call was to a nonprofit I'd found on that night shift months before, an organization that advocates for kids who grow up in monetized content. The second was to the lawyer they recommended, a woman named Ruth Calloway, 50s, gay bob, handshake like a door closing firmly. In her office that Friday, I laid it out the way I give handoff report. History, timeline, current status, no adjectives. Ruth listened with her pen down, which I've learned is how serious people listen. Then she explained what the new state law could actually do and what it couldn't. Content featuring Emma as a minor monetized meant a percentage belonged to Emma, owed into a trust. Records could be requested. If the family cooperated, no courtroom, just paperwork and a signature. If they didn't, Emma would have standing to pursue it when she turned 18. Which was months away, not years. And given that video of her crying at that kitchen island, Ruth said she could also make a call about a welfare check. Gentle, procedural, a knock, and a conversation. Then she slid the representation papers across the desk. And I want to tell you exactly what that felt like, because I signed a lot of forms that year, and this one weighed more than all of them together. Signing it meant my mother would get a formal notice with my name attached, not a fight at a dinner table she could cry her way out of. Paper process, the one language in our family that had never once belonged to her. The old daughter, the one who just wanted her mom to love her quietly someday, ended at that signature. I signed it anyway, dated it, passed it back. Signing that paper felt like defibrillating my own family. You shock the heart, hoping it starts beating right, knowing you might just be marking the time of death. If a kid you loved was living on camera, would you have signed? Tell me honestly in the comments and subscribe, because the notice reached my mother on a Thursday. On Friday, she asked to meet and she did not come alone. She brought Aunt Beverly, not a lawyer, which told me something. You bring a lawyer to fight the paper. You bring your sister to fight the daughter. We met at the diner, my booth, my terms. And Beverly opened before the coffee landed. Lawyers, Lauren, against your own mother. She's dying inside. Do you understand that? Family does not do this to family. I let it wash over me. The whole family first. She raised you. Everyone makes mistakes. And I watched my mother instead because my mother was being quiet and quiet was new. When Beverly paused for breath, Patricia put a hand on her sister's arm and said, "Beverly, stop." Then to me, with a look I couldn't file anywhere. You think I'd fight you on Emma's money? Either it was the performance of her life or it was bewilderment, real bewilderment, that the money had ever needed protecting from her. With my mother. The terrifying thing was that both could be true in the same sentence. The meeting ended without shouting, which in my family qualifies as a moonlanding. And that night, my father called me for the first time in 2 years. His voice had rust on it. He didn't say hello. He said, "I should have unplugged that camera 15 years ago." And then he cried, my silent electrician father, and said, "Tell me what you need me to do." Proof that people could change did exist in my family after all, which only made the question about my mother harder, not easier. Before he hung up, he cleared his throat and added one more thing. "Priya's been at the house twice this month. Your mother meets her out in the driveway like she doesn't want the walls to hear. And yet, the proofs kept coming. Stubborn as spring. Ruth sent over the trust agreement, the percentages, the accounting of years, expecting the usual months of stalling. My mother's lawyer advised her in writing to slow down and negotiate. She declined the advice. She signed the first full draft, initialed every page, and Ruth called me sounding almost annoyed. "In my career," she said, "the parents who sign this fast are about 1 in 20. I have to inform you that everything is going well." Sunday meals began with modest tables. My mom made a roast, but she never took a picture of it. You didn't grow up eating cold meals under a ring lamp if it seems insignificant to you. She described treatment in the manner of novices, mispronouncing several words, telling me that her therapist stated she uses attention like a painkiller, and then laughed inappropriately. The sound of a lady laughing while reading a diagnosis rather than a script. It was awkward. The most persuasive thing I had ever seen her do was be clumsy. During one of those meals, my sister let out a loud, unpleasant laugh at something my father had said. And it dawned on me that I had never heard that laugh at that table before since the film had never been usable. That evening, I came perilously close to feeling something about my mother that I hadn't since I was 8 years old. And because that's what it was, you may refer to it as hope. Then Ruth contacted my mobile phone during my shift on Wednesday. She said, "Lauren," and I didn't like the way her voice sounded. "You ought to take a seat. Do you know where Ruth's office will be tomorrow morning?" Without saying anything, she turned her monitor around, which is how serious people break terrible news. It had come to light via her regular inquiry into the channel's business records for the trust accounting. It was a professional pitch PowerPoint, the sort AY polished for streaming customers. The title page said, "Bright Side, The Road Home." The subtitle said, "A Mother's Redemption, One Daughter at a Time." A carefully crafted tagline was written in exquisite italics under the title. This must be seen by the public. Dressed up in a serif font and presented as a corporate promise, it was my mother's words from the foot of my hospital bed. Ruth scrolled. The fourth slide featured an outline of the first episode. The doorstep was the name given to it. Bullet points were included. C shows up without warning. Not glam, genuine. At first, M declines, genuine tension. A 6-episode reconciliation narrative that ends with a family Thanksgiving special. Wellness, home products, therapeutic applications, and sponsorship categories are related. My whole body went into work mode after reading it twice. Vital signs only, flat voice, cold hands. The date was the issue when I saw it in the file attributes. 6 weeks prior to my doorbell ringing, the deck was constructed. I stood behind my curtain, carefully, scientifically moved by the cardigan with the hooked elbows, while she sat in her vehicle, not shooting. My list in block letters, my restaurant, my exam. Everything fit into someone's season storyline as if they had scripted my role before I performed it. With my hands at 10 and 2, I sat in my vehicle in Ruth's parking garage for a long time without moving. For 6 weeks, what I had audited, confirmed, and dared to believe structured itself into episodes. However, there was one aspect that didn't match, and it caught me off guard. My mother still hadn't signed the paperwork that was linked to the deck, which was 6 weeks old. Some interactions shouldn't take place on screens, so I printed off the deck and traveled to Neatville. When I entered the kitchen, she was by herself. I placed the pages on the counter between us, title up, and asked her one question as level as a glass bubble. "Mom, which episode is this?" In front of me, she read the cover and became older. Next, give credit where credit is due. She didn't use shock. She took a seat and explained it plainly or quite clearly. Priya had come to her with the offer like a lifeline after the disaster. The refinanced home would be covered by the funds. And the way Priya pitched it, honey, it was a chance to patch things up with you ladies after they broke us in public. I could hear how wonderful those words would sound to a lady whose wounds had all been healed on stage. The meeting was taken by her. She gave them permission to draft. With her fists flat on the counter, she cursed that she had never signed, that therapy was genuine, that she had apologized to Emma, and that the doorstep belonged to Lauren. After I informed Priya that I was already heading to your home, they put it in writing. She asserted that. And there it was. My mother's whole illogical math. Both the deck and the tears were genuine. The redemption was taking place and it was for sale. And I was unable to distinguish between the woman's finish and the start of the performance. And at last I realized that maybe she couldn't either. I grabbed my pages. Before she could see my trembling hands, I responded, "If it's real, it can happen with the cameras off." And walked away. And I convinced myself that I was done, really done, that the test was unsuccessful, and that the matter was closed. Then my phone rang at 2 in the morning. Once again, Emma is speaking from the closet. Every talk that merits freaking out starts with her saying, "Me, don't freak out." In the kitchen, I heard my parents talking. They lose the home if she declines the offer. The payment scaled to an income that no longer exists, the refinancing from the prosperous years. And me, the agreement she made, the trust she signed, and the money she owes me. Everything is covered. The R's, my college, everything. After a brief silence, my younger sister spoke the words I had been avoiding for the last 2 months. "Perhaps I should just go ahead and do it. Just one season. I'm 17. I've spent my whole life on camera. One more season. I can make it throughout one more season. As I stood in my dimly lit kitchen, I heard my sister offer to feed herself back into the machine in order to repurchase money that had always belonged to her. And I heard it. Unbeknownst to me, I had been listening to this music my whole adult life. The sound of the wheels spinning around. The machine accomplishes just that. It doesn't have to pursue you. It just waits for your family to need the funds, then lets love handle the recruitment. And below, I heard something else, softer. Living is not the same as surviving. Emma's scheme. My strategy, the family strategy, our one and only strategy. It would be simple and pointless to tell her no. She didn't need my rejection. She needed an excuse to speak for herself. And the one card that remained in my hand was weighty enough to be the cause. Since it was the only item I possessed that my mother had never received, the fifth line on my list, which I had folded over at the restaurant, was written for me rather than for her. But before I played that card, I had to get to know the lady on the other side of the table, so I drove to Aunt Beverly's. Additionally, Beverly is the caretaker of the family attic for all of her first sermons. I posed a single query. What was Mom like when you were a child? For the first time in her recollection, Beverly was silent before returning downstairs with a shoebox. There were about a dozen pictures of my mother's whole childhood inside. 12. Downstate Illinois, a leaning farmhouse, a mother, and my grandmother, whom I had only seen twice and recalled only as a locked door and the scent of menthol. "Grandma drank," Beverly murmured. She gave me the one important picture after saying, "Girls were to be useful, not seen." Nobody in that house owned a camera worth the film. At the county fair, my 9-year-old mother was holding a ribbon for a pie she had prepared herself, and her smile was so intense that it was painful to look at. A child's first-ever grin. "Your grandma didn't come," Beverly said. That photo was taken by an unknown person and addressed to the residents. For years, Patricia kept it beneath her pillow. I spent a lot of time sitting in my vehicle outside Beverly's thinking about that picture. Not a single caption was excused. Not one. However, it clarified the engine. A camera has never been the object of my mother's affection. The only testimony that love had ever sent her was a camera. She hadn't been thinking about selling her girls. For eternity, she had been providing us with the only evidence of her existence that anybody had ever provided her. You don't have to dwell within someone's wound, even if you fully understand them. Snort's Priya would bring the contract to the dinner on Saturday, when everything would be finalized. As the light faded, I went to Neepville and parked behind Priya's white SUV. Through the front glass, I saw a warm, circular glow that was exactly the hue of my early years. In the den, someone had installed a ring lamp. The inside of the home had been set up the way I remembered holidays. Too perfect, too warm, a roast covered in foil, and my mother moving throughout it all with the brittle, brilliant intensity of opening night. Elegant and amiable, Priya stood up to shake my hand while carrying a leather folder like a hymnal. A camera on a tripod and a ring light, which glowed its gentle orange ring, the color of every Christmas I had spent as a child, were positioned in the den, aimed toward the nice sofa. Priya followed my gaze and replied, "Just to catch a little B-roll." Nothing is broadcast without everyone's consent. Everything is in the documentation. My mom avoided looking at the camera. Her eyes were like a flare rising over broad sea as she gazed at me. She was very aware of how this seemed. She hadn't disconnected it either. After getting halfway out of his chair, my father returned to his seat, muscle memory for 40 years. I looked at Emma at the end of the table, and she gave me the old reshoot gesture. The little tightness of the jaw that said, "Get me out of this scene." Over supper, Priya lay everything out, as smooth as lotion. There are 6 episodes. The trust was fully financed. Emma's college is the ours. The payments for the home caught up. Then she turned to face me and spoke the smartest thing that had been said in that home in 30 years. "The public deserves your side, Lauren, really. For the last 2 years, you have been the antagonist in this tale. You are being referred to by thousands of strangers as the daughter who deserted her distraught mother. That is fixed in episode 1. On camera, the record is permanently fixed. This is the unpleasant reality, the only thing I would ever acknowledge in a tale such as this one. I wanted it for 10 seconds or so. I saw that the comments were changing. I saw the people who sent the condolence cards saying they were sorry. I saw a complete reimbursement for my 2 years as the family monster. And may God assist me. I desired it. I then glanced at the ring light. The sofa where the reconciliation was supposed to take place was indicated by that warm aura, and I felt the 10 seconds come to an end. I got to my feet. I switched off the camera and went past the roast into the den. The den took on the honest hue of a November evening as I knelt down, tracked the cable to the socket, and disconnected the wall-mounted ring lamp. No one took a breath. Since business should come before blood, I went to Priya first. Emma doesn't rely on your performance to earn her trust. It's signed, I said. The claim has been submitted. That half is already over, though, as evening comes to a conclusion. This family's decision won't be based on a teen's college being kept captive by a season order. Even so, Priya opened the folder with professionalism, while I turned to face my mother and played the final card I had. The 5th line on the list is Mom. You deserve to hear it. She read it aloud when I unfolded the paper and stated it in front of her. Just barely. I'll let you see me when we turn off our cameras for an hour. I saw her struggle to comprehend it, and then start talking to you and me at the kitchen table. No cameras, no witnesses, no tale you will ever be permitted to tell, I declared tonight. Mom, it's the one thing you can't make money off of. Something you only learn about. When the hour is over, if you still want to sign that contract, do so, and I'll leave this family for the final time, taking Emma's future with me as it's already secure. However, if you're referring to only one word from the previous 2 months, this is the time when it takes place without the cameras, because it may occur without the cameras if it is genuine. This can, too. Priya was taken to the porch by Dad. Emma headed upstairs. And I offered my mother the one thing she had never received from me in that kitchen, behind the hum of the hood vent. It was something I had never really given to anybody, not even Mark or Carol. I explained the 11 weeks to her. The name I had chosen but never spoken, June. The 200 notifications that informed the world before anybody told me. The nurse's eyes that told me before her tongue did. And what happens to a woman when she finds out that her sorrow has a discount code before it has a name? With no wall to hide behind and no lens to act for, I let my mother to watch me disintegrate at her kitchen table. I made myself visible to her. I would charge it in the same manner even if it cost me all I have. My mother was sitting opposite from me after I was done, looking completely destroyed, unlike anything I had ever seen. Mascaraless, bloated, aged, without angles or light. Snorts in a voice I remembered from a county fair picture, a 9-year-old's voice. She voiced the question that had been the foundation of her whole existence. But who will know if I make a difference and nobody ever notices it, she said. I will, I replied. There was a buzz from the hood vent. In a glass, the ice moved. I have sat with families in hospital hallways, so I am professionally familiar with long silences. It was the longest silence our family has ever produced. Then my mom told me about the picture under the pillow, the stranger with the camera, the pie, and the ribbon. Furthermore, confession only matters if you bring it to the table yourself, which is why I didn't say Beverly had outdone her. At the end, I said, I know. And I need you to desire the version of us in which we clap alone. With that, she sat. Then she stood up, went to the porch, and gave Priya the unsigned leather folder. Tell them no, she said. Everything. The return, the special, and the show. To her credit, Priya didn't waste time convincing. The market replaces rather than begs. Gathering her coat, she said politely, Patricia, you'll be replaced by Friday. Every time someone says yes. By the way, I could never defeat that machine. And I want you to know that I am aware of it. It did not perish on that porch. It just relocated to another family's driveway, but it moved without my. That week, the hospital post finally came down. Then the rest, 2 decades of it, the full archive turned to private in one long evening. My mother's hand shaking on the trackpad. Emma sat beside her scanning through the confirmations. The two of them deleting a memorial together, and the trust papers passed via Ruth's office. Emma's stake in Emma's name impenetrable till she's 18, which is to say shortly. Let me itemize the cost because catharsis without a receipt is just a myth. The yellow home put up for sale in November. It was listed by my mother herself. It turns out that you can afford a smaller life when you quit performing one, and that statement has more dignity than anything she has ever tweeted. As it always happens, the internet crafted its own conclusion. The domineering daughter drove her unfortunate mother offline, according to a creative forum. And that version of myself is still out there, wearing my name, unchangeable and permanent. I never fixed it. The only thing I had really achieved would have been lost if I had corrected it. The last phrase of the exam, which I had prepared for myself, was my silence. Even if I won, I would never be able to satisfy my mother. I still don't talk to some of my cousins. Birthday greetings from Aunt Beverly include a little too much scripture. I pay that tax every year. I told Mark everything on my side of the ledger, including June's name. Exactly on time and 2 years late. I immediately inquired as to whether the ring was still available. Yes, it was. To be clear, my mother is not done yet, because you don't arrive at changed. It is a present tense verb. When Emma's birthday cake came out, she instinctively reached up her phone, stopped herself, and placed it face down on the counter like a smoker crushing a pack. She then stared at me across the candles the way a student looks at a teacher. My family's progress is gauged by things that aren't shared. That year, Thanksgiving returned to us, but it was smaller and 2 years later. No one took a video of it. The rental, a small brick 2-bedroom home with an unreversible kitchen, hosted Thanksgiving. And from beginning to end, it was the most enjoyable vacation of my life. It was a dry turkey. We allowed my father to land the junction box despite his tale about it having no end. That week, Emma received her early acceptance letter, which she read aloud to us as she had printed it just for the table. Not a single phone was upright. My chest constricted when my mother gave me a shoe box at the end, since shoe boxes had special meaning for my family. There were printed photos within. I was giggling while eating cotton candy at the fair with my eyes closed. Emma was drooling while dozing off on Dad's chest. At someone's graduation, my mother was caught mid-size, which was really embarrassing. Every shot from 20 years of outtakes is crooked, fuzzy, and useless. Those who weren't satisfied and never made the feed. We were the only ones. She had written for a single audience in her meticulous teacher's handwriting on the lid. I realized what I was holding when I glanced up and saw that she was observing me with her hands folded, as anxious as a girl at a fair. It was my whole childhood's negative place. The single person who was ever intended to view it received everything that had been authentic the whole time, printed at a pharmacy. Emma will enroll in college in the autumn. On her birthday, the trust is unlocked. Her call, her signature, her name. She is discussing growing up online in her application essays. In her words, her version. And since the girl can write, I sobbed in a parking lot when she first allowed me to read one. Additionally, for the first time in our family's history, the narrator is the one who really experienced the event. I regret to inform you that the machine is operational. This week, another family is popular. There's another 6-year-old with a camera in her face, and she can't be reached by my list. I was unable to repair the internet. I fixed a table in the kitchen. My phone number and Sunday afternoons are in the hands of my mother. She doesn't have a picture of me. She is no longer inquiring. That's not being chilly. That's the situation. Like everything life, renewed every season. It turns out that forgiveness is not a gate you can unlock. For as long as it remains true, you both continue to sign this contract in a kitchen with the cameras turned off. What I now know is as follows. Love that has to be seen in order to be genuine was never true love. It was cheers. And the distinction is clear. When all the lights in the house go out, just one of them is still holding you. That's my tale. One handwritten list, one hospital picture, and one permanently disconnected ring light. Perhaps it's time to invite someone in your life to spend an hour away from the cameras if they continue to act out change rather than experiencing it. Share this tale with someone who is in need right now if it seems similar to you. Please subscribe, leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the next.